John Franklin Kennedy was the 35th president of the United States and also the youngest man elected to the office. On November 22nd, 1963, when he was hardly past his first 1,000 days in office, he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. It was 12:30 p.m. in Dallas, Texas, while JFK was riding in a presidential motorcade through Dealey Plaza. Kennedy was in the vehicle with his wife, Jacqueline, Texas Governor John Canale, and Canale's wife, Nellie, when he was fatally shot from the nearby Texas School Book Depository by Lee Harvey Oswald, a former U.S. Marine. The motorcade rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where Kennedy was pronounced dead about 30 minutes after the shooting. Canale was also wounded in the attack, but recovered. Around 70 minutes after Kennedy and Canale were shot, Oswald was arrested by the Dallas Police Department and charged under Texas state law with the murder of Kennedy. At 11:21 a.m. on November 24th, 1963, as live television cameras covered Oswald being moved through the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, he was fatally shot by Dallas nightclub operator Jack Ruby. The official FBI report claims that JFK was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald and him alone, but is that the truth? It has been almost 60 years since the assassination happened, and many people are still trying to uncover the truth of the assassination. We are going to deep dive into the conspiracy theories behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the CIA. One of the most popular conspiracy theories revolving around the assassination of JFK is that the Central Intelligence Agency was connected in the assassination. First, it is believed that Kennedy's attempts to limit the CIA's powers following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 angered high-ranking officials within the agency. The power struggle supposedly created a motive for the CIA to eliminate the president. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 was a disastrous CIA-led operation aimed at overthrowing Fidel Castro's regime in Cuba. It was a major failure, resulting in embarrassment for the United States. President Kennedy, who had inherited the plan from the previous administration, took responsibility for the operation's failure. Kennedy was deeply disappointed with the CIA's handling of the operation and its intelligence failures. He blamed the agency for not providing adequate support to the Cuban exiles during the invasion, and as a result, Kennedy took actions to limit the CIA's power and restructure its operations. One of the key actions taken by Kennedy was the removal of CIA Director Alan Dulles, Deputy Director Charles Cabell, and Deputy Director for Plans Richard Bissell. This move was seen by some conspiracy theorists as a betrayal and a direct challenge to the CIA's authority. Additionally, Kennedy issued a National Security Action Memorandum in 1961, which called for the establishment of a new covert action oversight panel chaired by the President's National Security Advisor. This panel aimed to increase the White House's control over CIA operations and reduce the agency's autonomy. These attempts by Kennedy to curtail the CIA's power and assert greater control over its activities reportedly caused resentment among high-ranking officials within the agency. Some conspiracy theorists argue that the power struggle created a motive for elements within the CIA to eliminate Kennedy. They also suggest that the disgruntled CIA officials who felt betrayed and feared further limitations on their influence conspired to orchestrate Kennedy's assassination. By eliminating the president, they could regain their autonomy and continue their covert operations without interference. Second, Kennedy's stance on the Vietnam War is said to have threatened the interests of the military-industrial complex. The theory suggests that this powerful entity, which profited from the fear to escalate U.S. involvement and thus took action. During Kennedy's presidency, the United States was increasingly involved in the Vietnam War. However, Kennedy's approach to the conflict differed from that of his predecessors. He expressed skepticism about the effectiveness of the military intervention and was cautious about escalating U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Kennedy's reluctance to commit large numbers of American troops and his emphasis on limited military support instead of full-scale intervention challenged the interests of the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex refers to the network of defense contractors, military officials, and politicians with vested interests in the defense industry and war-related activities. The theory suggests that this powerful entity, which profited from military contracts and war expenditures, feared that Kennedy's hesitation would jeopardize their financial interests. It is argued that they needed a president who would be more inclined to escalate the war and provide lucrative contracts for the defense industry. According to this theory, the military-industrial complex conspired to eliminate Kennedy to ensure that a more favorable president who would advance their interests in Vietnam would come to power. By removing Kennedy from the equation, they could shape US foreign policy in a way that would benefit their economic and political goals. Furthermore, some conspiracy theorists argue that Kennedy's pursuit of diplomacy and his desire to de-escalate tensions with the Soviet Union and Cuba threatened the covert operations of the CIA. These operations often involved attempts to overthrow foreign leaders, and Kennedy's policies were seen as a hindrance to these activities. During his presidency, John F. Kennedy demonstrated a willingness to pursue diplomacy and ease tensions with the Soviet Union and Cuba, which challenged the status quo of Cold War dynamics. This shift in approach and Kennedy's desire for peaceful coexistence conflicted with the covert operations conducted by the CIA. The CIA had been involved in numerous covert operations aimed at overthrowing foreign leaders and governments deemed unfriendly to US interests. These operations often included supporting anti-communist forces, funding paramilitary groups, and conducting clandestine activities in various countries. Kennedy's policies, such as his support for the nuclear test ban treaty and the establishment of a back-channel communication system with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, were seen by some conspiracy theorists as a threat to the CIA's covert operations. They argue that the agency feared that Kennedy's pursuit of diplomacy and de-escalation would hinder their ability to carry out these operations and maintain their influence. According to this theory, elements within the CIA conspired to eliminate Kennedy in order to protect their covert operations and preserve the status quo of the Cold War. They believed that by removing Kennedy from power, they could ensure that the continuation of their operations without interference or constraints imposed by the president's policies. One intriguing aspect of this theory involves the connections of Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin, to the CIA. Oswald's time in Russia, his involvement with anti-Castro activities, and his alleged ties to CIA-funded projects like the Fair Play for Cuba Committee have raised suspicions. Lee Harvey Oswald had a complex background that has led to speculation about his potential ties to the CIA. Several aspects of Oswald's life and activities have contributed to these suspicions. Firstly, Oswald's time in Russia is seen as a significance. In 1959, Oswald defected to the Soviet Union, where he lived for about 2.5 years. During his stay, he married a Russian woman and expressed sympathy for communist ideology. Oswald's defection and subsequent return to the United States raised questions about his motivations and possible involvement with intelligence agencies. Secondly, Oswald was known for his involvement with anti-Castro activities. He had a demonstrated interest in the political situation in Cuba and had associations with groups that opposed Fidel Castro's regime. Oswald's time in New Orleans, where he formed connections with anti-Castro groups, has fueled speculation about his potential involvement in CIA-backed operations targeting Cuba. Additionally, Oswald's alleged ties to CIA-funded projects, such as the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, have raised suspicion. The Fair Play for Cuba Committee was an organization that advocated for normalizing relations with Cuba, and conspiracy theorists argue that Oswald's involvement with this group, which received some financial support from the CIA indirectly, suggests a deeper connection to intelligence activities. These connections and activities have led some conspiracy theorists to propose that Oswald was a CIA operative or a patsy who was manipulated by the intelligence agency. They suggest that Oswald's background, including his time in Russia and involvement with the anti-Castro activities, could be indicative of his role as a pawn in a larger conspiracy orchestrated by the CIA. The Mafia. The Mafia conspiracy theory suggests that organized crime, specifically the Italian-American Mafia, orchestrated the assassination of JFK. Firstly, it is alleged that Kennedy's administration, led by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, intensified efforts to crack down on organized crime. This aggressive stance reportedly threatened the Mafia's lucrative operations, including illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and labor racketeering. During his tenure as Attorney General, Robert F. Kennedy made combating organized crime a top priority. He recognized the significant influence and criminal activities of the Mafia in the United States and aimed to dismantle their operation. One of the key initiatives undertaken by Kennedy's administration was the formation of a special task force known as the Organized Crime and Racketeering Section within the Department of Justice. This task force focused on investigating and prosecuting members of organized crime syndicates, including the Mafia, and Kennedy and his team utilized various tactics to undermine the Mafia's operations. They targeted illegal gambling operations, drug trafficking networks, labor racketeering, and other criminal enterprises associated with organized crime. This aggressive stance and increased enforcement posed a significant threat to the Mafia's financial interests and power structure. Furthermore, Kennedy's administration sought to expose the links between organized crime and political corruption. The Attorney General utilized the resources of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and other agencies to investigate and gather evidence against key figures within the Mafia, aiming to hold them accountable for their illicit activities. The aggressive crackdown on organized crime, particularly the Mafia, put Kennedy and his administration at odds with powerful criminal networks deeply entrenched in various industries. The Mafia relied on activities like illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and labor racketeering to generate vast profits and maintain their influence. According to the conspiracy theory, the Mafia felt threatened by Kennedy's administration's unwavering commitment to dismantle their operations. The theory suggests that eliminating President Kennedy would serve as a warning to future administrations, dissuading them from pursuing similar aggressive anti-mafia efforts. Secondly, proponents of the theory point to alleged connections between JFK and influential figures associated with the Mafia. It is claimed that Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., JFK's father, had ties to organized crime figures and used their influence to further his son's political career. Joseph Kennedy Sr., a prominent businessman and patriarch of the Kennedy family, had a complex history that has given rise to allegations of connections to organized crime. Proponents of the Mafia conspiracy theory suggest that Joseph Kennedy used his alleged ties to influential figures within the Mafia to advance his son John F. Kennedy's political career. One aspect often cited is Joseph Kennedy's business dealings in the Prohibition era. During this time, he operated in the liquor industry and is believed to have engaged in bootlegging activities. It is claimed that his bootlegging operations required connections with organized crime figures, including members of the Mafia, to ensure the smooth running of his illicit operations. Additionally, some conspiracy theorists assert that Joseph Kennedy relied on the financial support of Mafia-linked individuals to fund his political campaigns and propel his son's political aspirations. They argue that these alleged connections helped secure political favors, endorsements, and strategic alliances for the Kennedy family. Furthermore, it is suggested that Joseph Kennedy's reputed ties to organized crime provided him with valuable intelligence and insider information that he could leverage to benefit his family's political ambition. This alleged access to sensitive information and influence within the criminal networks could have potentially assisted in John F. Kennedy's rise to power. Additionally, the theory suggests that JFK's extramarital affairs and alleged interactions with individuals tied to the Mafia created potential leverage for the criminal organization. It is posited that the Mafia could have exploited this information to manipulate and control the president. John F. Kennedy's personal life was marked by well-documented extramarital affairs, which have become a subject of scrutiny and speculation. Proponents of the Mafia conspiracy theory argue that these affairs, coupled with alleged interactions between Kennedy and individuals tied to the Mafia, provided the criminal organization with potential leverage over the president. According to the theory, the Mafia could have exploited the knowledge of Kennedy's extramarital affairs to manipulate and control him. They might have used this information to pressure the president into making decisions beneficial to their criminal activities or to ensure his compliance with their interests. The alleged interactions between JFK and individuals linked to the Mafia further contribute to this theory. It is claimed that Kennedy had associations with figures involved in organized crime, including high-ranking mobsters and their associates. These connections are believed to have created opportunities for the Mafia to gather compromising information or establish influential networks within the Kennedy administration. Conspiracy theorists suggest that the Mafia could have used their knowledge of Kennedy's affairs and interactions with their associates as a leverage to influence policy decisions. By potentially threatening to expose these secrets, they may have sought to ensure that the president did not take actions detrimental to their criminal operations or their own personal interests. Furthermore, some conspiracy theorists argue that key figures associated with the Mafia, such as mob boss Sam Giancana, had a motive to eliminate JFK due to his administration's efforts to extradite him and his involvement in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. One aspect of the Mafia conspiracy theory suggests that the Kennedy administration's efforts to crack down on organized crime, along with specific actions related to Sam Giancana and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, provided a motive for the Mafia to eliminate JFK. Sam Giancana, a prominent mob boss during that time, allegedly had connections to both the Mafia and high-ranking government officials. It is claimed that Giancana and other organized crime figures had established relationships with members of the Kennedy administration, which may have included illicit activities such as bribery and political favors. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 is considered a pivotal event in this theory. The operation, which aimed to overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro, was covertly supported by the United States. However, it ultimately failed, leading to embarrassment for the Kennedy administration. According to some conspiracy theorists, the Mafia had alleged involvement in the Bay of Pigs operation, and they suggest that Sam Giancana and other mob figures had aided the CIA in organizing and facilitating the invasion, primarily through their connections to anti-Castro Cuban exiles. It is further alleged that the Mafia had to gain lucrative opportunities in Cuba if the operation succeeded. However, when the Bay of Pigs invasion failed, it is theorized that the Kennedy administration distanced itself from the Mafia and abandoned promises of support. This perceived betrayal, combined with the administration's subsequent efforts to extradite Sam Giancana on criminal charges, including tax evasion, became a motive for the Mafia to seek retribution. The theory posits that eliminating JFK would serve as a warning to future administrations and demonstrate the Mafia's power and willingness to retaliate against those who cross them. By removing Kennedy, the Mafia could potentially protect their criminal enterprises and send a message to other politicians and law enforcement agencies. The magic bullet. The magic bullet theory is a term used to describe the Warren Commission's explanation of a single bullet causing multiple wounds to both JFK and Governor Canale. According to the official account, this bullet, known as Commission Exhibit 399, played a significant role in the sequence of events. The theory suggests that the bullet was fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository by Lee Harvey Oswald and traveled in a straight line, hitting President Kennedy in the upper back, passing through his neck, and then striking Governor Canale causing several wounds. It is believed that the bullet finally came to rest in Governor Canale's thigh in relatively intact condition. The magic bullet theory is essential to the Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acted alone in assassinating President Kennedy. It serves as a crucial element in supporting the notion of a single shooter and refuting the possibility of a second gunman or a broader conspiracy. However, critics of the magic bullet theory argue that it defies the laws of physics and the known capabilities of the ammunition used. They point out that the bullet's alleged trajectory, which requires it to change direction multiple times and inflict significant damage, seems highly improbable. Skeptics also analyze the Zapruder film, a well-known and highly scrutinized piece of evidence. They contend that the film shows JFK reacting to the first shot from a location that does not align with the official trajectory of the magic bullet. This discrepancy raises questions about the accuracy of the theory and the bullet's path. Furthermore, critics argue that the condition of the bullet itself is inconsistent with the damage it supposedly caused. They suggest that a bullet that inflicted such extensive wounds would have been deformed or fragmented upon impact rather than emerging nearly intact. Because according to the alleged trajectory, the bullet would have hit some sort of bone, which would have caused the bullet to break. But the bullet was fully intact. The New World Order. The New World Order / Illuminati conspiracy posits that a secretive and powerful global elite known as the Illuminati have been orchestrating events to establish a totalitarian world government. According to this theory, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is believed to be a key piece of their grand plan. According to this theory, the Illuminati, an exclusive organization believed to consist of influential individuals from various sectors such as politics, finance, and entertainment, aim to manipulate world events to consolidate power and control. Their ultimate objective is said to be the establishment of a new world order, a global government with a centralized authority. Proponents of the conspiracy theory argue that JFK posed a threat to the Illuminati's plan. They claim that JFK's presidency and his efforts to challenge established power structures, promote transparency, and advocate for individual freedoms made him a target for those seeking to maintain control over the world. Conspiracy theorists point to JFK's speeches and policy decisions as evidence of his opposition to the New World Order. His famous secret society speech, delivered at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on April 27, 1961, is often cited as a key indicator of his knowledge of the Illuminati's existence and their influence on world affairs. In this speech, JFK warned about the dangers of secret societies and their potential impact on democratic societies. While he did not specifically mention the Illuminati, some theorists interpret his words as a veiled reference to the secretive global elite. They believe that JFK's intention to expose their influence of these secret societies on global events led to his assassination. Additionally, conspiracy theorists scrutinize alleged symbols and connections surrounding JFK's assassination to support their claims. They suggest that the Zapruder film, which captured the assassination, contains hidden symbolism that hints at the Illuminati's involvement. These symbols, they argue, were carefully orchestrated to communicate a message and reinforce their control over the narrative. The Cuban Government. As we know, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was in full swing during the early 1960s. This era was marked by political tensions and the constant threat of nuclear war. Against this backdrop, the Cuban government, led by Fidel Castro, became a significant point of contention for the United States. Fidel Castro's rise to power in 1959 and his establishment of a communist regime in Cuba caused concerns for US officials. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, backed by the CIA, further strained relations between the two countries. But could the Cuban government's frustrations with the US have led them to plot the assassination of JFK? Enter Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating President Kennedy. Oswald had a complex history with connections that raised suspicions about potential Cuban involvement. It is alleged that Oswald sympathized with communism and even spent time in the Soviet Union. But it's his connections to Cuba that fuel the conspiracy theory that we're exploring. Lee Harvey Oswald's life and associations have been thoroughly scrutinized in the aftermath of the assassination. One significant factor that raises eyebrows is Oswald's apparent sympathy for communism. In 1959, Oswald traveled to the Soviet Union, where he lived for 2.5 years before returning to the United States with his Russian wife, Marina. Oswald's time in the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War caught the attention of US intelligence agencies. Some believe that his experiences there may have forged a deeper connection to communism and ideologies contrary to American interests. However, it is Oswald's connections to Cuba that are of particular interest in the context of this conspiracy theory. In the years leading up to the JFK assassination, Oswald's activities in New Orleans came under scrutiny. Oswald was known to associate with individuals tied to pro-Castro organizations, such as the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He distributed pro-Castro pamphlets, publicly supported the Cuban Revolution, and even engaged in heated debates with anti-Castro activists. Furthermore, Oswald's activities took a suspicious turn when he visited the Cuban consulate in Mexico City just weeks before the assassination. It is alleged that he attempted to obtain a visa to travel to Cuba, but his request was denied. Some speculate that his visit and his interaction with Cuban officials hint at a deeper involvement or communication between Oswald and the Cuban government. Another piece of the puzzle lies in Oswald's association with anti-Castro groups. It is important to note that Oswald's political beliefs and actions seem to swing back and forth, causing confusion and casting doubt on his true alliances. On one hand, Oswald proclaimed his support for Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution, and on the other hand, he had interactions with anti-Castro activists and was known to engage in activities that could be perceived as antagonistic towards the Cuban regime. One specific group that stands out is Alpha 66, an anti-Castro organization made up of Cuban exiles. On the day of JFK's assassination, members of Alpha 66 were reportedly present in Dallas. This fact has fueled speculation that the Cuban government may have used this group as a tool to carry out the plot. Proponents of the conspiracy theory argue that the Cuban government, feeling threatened by the US and seeking revenge for various reasons, could have exploited Oswald's connections and manipulated events to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. All right, guys, and that's going to be today's video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about these conspiracy theories, and if you think there could be some truth behind these, or if these are just simply just wild. Also, if you guys are new here, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, post notifications on. And without further ado, have a great rest of your day. Peace out.